member, or possibly it could be an aspect of a multiple personality. Other than that, reincarnation was probably the last thing in my mind about what had happened to her.
Under hypnosis, Georgia began to give detail to her visions. She believes the girl in her dreams is named Sandra. According to Georgia's visions, Tommy Hicks drowned in the Ohio River. His body was never found. Sandra Jean Jenkins was left unmarried and pregnant with Tommy's child. Distraught over the death of Tommy and unable to face the shame that their unborn child would bring, Sandra Jean Jenkins took her own life. Georgia began searching for the people and places she saw in her dreams. In 1984, she journeyed to Marietta, Ohio, where she met with reporter Ted Bauer. Ted is a lifelong resident of Marietta and worked for the local newspaper for 32 years.
When George arrived in Marietta, I said, I'll take you around and show you some of the places that you talked about over the phone. And she says, no, I'll show you where to go. I couldn't believe her knowledge of Marietta. I can't buy the reincarnation bit, but she has some kind of power, some way of knowing what happened in the past.
In a nearby town, Georgia located a house she says matches the house in her visions. Relatives of the former owner gave Georgia what she feels is evidence that Sandra Jean Jenkins did exist.
They brought out a picture taken in 1908, and the girl that I call Sandra is standing in that picture. There was a statement made by a member of the family. I don't know this girl's name, but I know she drowned out back of the house.
Georgia's story is difficult to accept, but there are so many coincidences that we cannot simply dismiss it out of hand. After our broadcast, we learned of another equally baffling coincidence. A 36-year-old college professor who had never met Georgia Rudolph claims that over a year before our broadcast, he underwent hypnosis and had a past life experience in which he recalled that he was a young man living in Ohio at the turn of the century named Tommy Hicks.
When I saw the original segment with Georgia Rudolph, it went through, and then when Georgia Rudolph finally said, that his name was Tom Hicks, I almost fell off the couch.
Our broadcast aired in February 1990. In September of 1988, Jack Turnock underwent regressive hypnosis with Dr. Bruce Crystal in Jackson.
The particular session that I went through, I was taken back to turn of the century Ohio, and I told the interviewer that my name was Tom Hicks.
While under hypnosis, Jack said that a river seemed to play a large part in the life of Tommy Hicks, and that Tommy's younger brother had drowned. Jack also recalled that Tommy Hicks had a girlfriend with long, dark hair.
I still remain somewhat skeptical. I need more proof. But we're getting closer and closer to the point where we cannot excuse it on the basis of chance or probability.
I think Jennifer.
In September, Jack Turnock traveled to Macon, Georgia, and underwent regressive hypnosis with Dr. Douglas Smith. During the session, Dr. Smith asked Jack several key questions in order to determine if he could have in any way fabricated the events he described while under hypnosis 2 years earlier.
Hair's pulled back. But it's as long as
we have asked him to compare the reincarnation experience that he had with something that did not occur to him, and he could make the distinction. In my professional opinion, I am quite certain that he was telling the truth.
Boat was stuck. I was skeptical before the 2 regression sessions that I've had, but if they're not true, then there's an awful lot of very odd coincidences going on.
Something very definite is going on, but we have no rational explanation that science can provide as to what's happening. I suggest we keep an open mind.
The stories of Georgia Rudolph and Jack Turnock are indeed hard to believe, but keep in mind, many of the world's religions accept reincarnation as a basic part of their beliefs. For the rest of us, the possibility of life after death, however hopeful, remains an unsolved mystery. Next week on Unsolved Mysteries. 55 years ago, aviatrix Amelia Earhart was the most famous woman in America. In 1937, she left Oakland, California to fly around the world. 6 weeks later, her plane went down in the South Pacific. Today, evidence from the remote island of Saipan suggests that Amelia Earhart was captured by the Japanese and may have been executed. In Woodstock, Illinois, a high school romance turns sour and ends in tragedy for 17-year-old Colleen Ritter. Perhaps you can help capture her missing boyfriend, who is wanted for murder. Also, a special appeal from the musical group New Kids on the Block. 3 years ago, 16-year-old Carrie Nixon disappeared. In June 1989, she may have been spotted at New Kids concert in Los Angeles. Join me next week for another edition of Unsolved Mysteries.
This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
Tonight on Unsolved Mysteries, the poignant saga of Amelia Earhart. 53 years ago, she vanished in the South Pacific during a round-the-world flight. But eyewitness accounts suggest that Amelia Earhart may have survived and been captured by the Japanese Navy. In Woodstock, Illinois, Colleen Ritter and Rick Church were typical high school sweethearts until their romance went sour. Now, Colleen's parents are dead and Rick Church has disappeared. Using an electronic store as a front, FBI agents in Florida go undercover to capture the kingpins of a South American drug ring. A real-life story of Miami Vice. Also, we will present a follow-up to our story about a popular 16-year-old girl who mysteriously vanished from Osable Forks, New York. Last, perhaps you can help find Carrie Lynn Nixon. Two years ago, we examined the strange disappearance of a 16-year-old girl. Tonight, an update on her case and an urgent appeal from her family and members of the teenage recording group, New Kids on the Block. Carrie Lynn Nixon was an above-average student and well-known and liked in the small community of Osable Forks, New York. At around 10 p.m. on June 22, 1987, Carrie was returning home after running an errand for her father. A few minutes later, and only 700 feet from her doorstep, Carrie Lynn Nixon disappeared.
My immediate reaction was terror, and it's been a nightmare ever since.
Was Carrie's disappearance the result of foul play, or had she simply run away?
Carrie wrote some letters to a friend, and in these letters, she indicated she would like to live in Hawaii, move to Florida, possibly California, and in fact, leave the town of Osable Forks when she turned 18.
My theory on this case is Carrie Lynn Nixon was abducted. Her father gave her $20 for groceries. She went to Thomas's store for her father, left Thomas's store with the bag of groceries. If she was a runaway, she would have done none of those things. She would have been dressed better. She would have taken money with her that she had in her bedroom after we searched her bedroom. She is a victim of a kidnapping.
Authorities investigated dozens of reported sightings of Carrie, but were unable to confirm her identity.
Nothing has been found, not one thing. She's walked off the face of the earth, as far as we're concerned.
As the years in the investigation dragged on, Carrie's parents began to give up hope of ever finding their daughter. But all that changed in March of this year when they saw a videotape of a concert given by the popular singing group New Kids on the Block. On June 5, 1989, the group filmed their Hangin' Tough live concert in Los Angeles, California.
Let's do it!
Among the crowd of teenage fans, Kathy and Gary Nixon saw a familiar face.
We couldn't believe how much this girl looked like our daughter. So we just kept rewinding it and going over and over and over, and we just couldn't believe it because we never really had any hope that she was alive. And then there's this girl that looks so much like her. I'm not 100% convinced, but it looks like our Carrie.
Upon viewing the tape, I picked the girl out immediately the first time it ran through. It was obvious to me that this girl did look like Carrie Nixon and appeared to be her.
This detail-enhanced photograph was made from the videotape and compared with a picture of Carrie taken shortly before she disappeared.
There's obviously many similarities. The hair length, the hair color, the shape of the face, the chin, the mouth, and it displayed a multiple of earrings in the right ear, in which Carrie Nixon has 4 earrings in her right ear and 2 in her left. So the photo-enhanced finished product further convinced the Nixons that this could be their daughter.
Members of the New Kids on the Block did not recognize the girl in the crowd, but after hearing Carrie's story, wanted to make a personal appeal.
Well, I'd just like to say to Carrie that if you're out there, the best thing to do would just be to call somebody and, you know, even if you go to your local police and just tell them your situation, that maybe they can help you out. Or if any of you viewers out there who have seen her at a New Kid show or just seen her on the street, if you could contact someone, you know, to let them know where she is, or if she's all right or anything, that would be a big help.
We need to find this girl, find out who she is, whether it's Carrie or not, just so that if it's not, we can go on to something else to try and find her. I love you, Carrie, and I need to talk to you.
Six decades ago, Amelia Earhart was one of the most famous women in the world. She had the figure of a movie star and the face of an angelic tomboy. The first woman to pilot an aircraft across the Atlantic in 1932, Amelia defied labels and definitions. Part all-American girl, part daredevil, she was a perfect hero for her time. But she was also ahead of her time, a self-effacing yet outspoken champion of women's rights.
To men or women. A pilot's a pilot.
I hope that such equality could be carried out in other fields so that men and women may achieve equally in any endeavor they set out.
On May 20th, 1937, Amelia Earhart and her navigator, Fred Noonan, prepared for takeoff from Oakland, California. Amelia was 39 years old. This flight was designed to be the capstone of her brilliant career as an aviator. She was attempting to become the first person, man or woman, to fly around the world at its widest point, the equator. Today, 53 years later, new evidence has deepened the mystery surrounding Amelia Earhart's last flight. The first leg of Amelia's flight was via Burbank to Tucson. From there, she went on to New Orleans, Miami, Puerto Rico, Venezuela, and Brazil. Amelia and Fred then crossed the Atlantic, landing in Senegal on the African coast. They made several short hops across Africa, then headed for Karachi in what is now Pakistan. From there to Calcutta, Rangoon, Singapore, and 2 stops in Java, then Australia, and finally Lae, New Guinea.
Amelia and Fred had flown almost 2/3 of the way around the world, and they'd done it fairly quickly. They must have been very tired when they got to Lae, New Guinea. They had 2 days there. They tried to rest up, but after that amount of flying time, they must have been exhausted, and here they were facing the most difficult leg of their flight.
From New Guinea, Amelia and Fred faced a grueling 18 hours in the air. They also had to hit an inconceivably tiny target, Howland Island. Howland is just 1.5 miles long and 1/2 mile wide. At its highest point, the island is only 20 feet above sea level, about half the height of a telephone pole.
The difficulty factor on a scale of 1 to 10, piloting from Lae, New Guinea to Howland Island in 1937 in that aircraft, make it a 10, the most difficult. It would be like flying across the United States and locating the 18th green of a golf course in New Jersey.
On July 1st, 1937, Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan prepared to leave New Guinea. Squalls were predicted along their route. They decided to postpone takeoff. Amelia wired her husband that she would not make it back to Oakland on the 4th of July as planned. At precisely 10 a.m. on the 2nd of July, Amelia and Fred took off. They planned to cross the international date line and land on Howland Island 18 hours later.
Though she had the best navigator in the world sitting beside her, Fred Noonan, she was responsible for running that airplane. She had to fly the heading. She had to watch the weather. She had to watch the fuel flows. She had to watch the mixtures, the carburetor air, make sure they weren't getting carburetor ice. She was responsible for the airplane maintaining altitude, maintaining trim. All these things were constant. Plus, she had to do the radio transmissions.
Amelia was not competent where radio was concerned. She would never take the time to learn properly. I think it can be honestly said that the radio was the Achilles heel of that flight.
It may seem incredible now, but in 1937, before radar came into use, a battery-powered radio was Amelia's only link with the world. Plying the waters around Howland Island, the Coast Guard cutter Itasca stood ready to communicate by radio with Amelia as soon as she came within range. With a radio bearing, the Itasca could rescue Amelia and Fred at sea should anything go wrong. For 16 hours, nothing did. Then Amelia's lack of radio expertise came into play.
About 17 hours and 14 minutes into the flight, now we're really getting to the critical part. She reports that she's approximately 200 miles out, and she wants them to take a radio bearing on her, and she whistles into the microphone.
Want bearing on 3105 kilocycles on hour.
She stopped whistling.
Amelia did not whistle long enough to give the Itasca a consistent signal. What Amelia failed to understand was that whistling wasn't necessary. Simply allowing an uninterrupted radio signal to play for 30 seconds would have been enough.
Please repeat last transmission on 7500. I repeat.
19 hours into the flight and 1 hour behind schedule, Amelia and Fred calculated that they should be directly above Howland Island, where they had also established clear radio contact. Looking down, they saw only ocean.
Fred, I don't see Howland Island.
I don't know where it is. We should be right on top of it.
It's not on my side.
I don't see it here either.
Again, all Amelia had to do was open her radio line to let a signal play so the Itasca could take a bearing and find out how far off course she was. Instead, Amelia stopped her radio transmissions. She had overused the radio and drained her battery on a flight the year before, so she was reluctant simply to let the transmitter run.
They know they've missed the island, gone past it, but they don't know which side. They have no way of knowing. They have to take a radio bearing. So Amelia does the only thing she can. 20 hours and 13 minutes into the flight, Amelia sends her last message. Her voice is talking very rapidly and very tense.
137 will repeat message. We will repeat this message on 6210.
In her final radio message, Amelia said she was switching frequencies to 6210 kilocycles. The Itasca could not reach her on that frequency. They assumed that Amelia, once again unfamiliar with emergency radio procedure, had turned her radio dial to the wrong setting. Frantically, the Itasca tried other frequencies with no luck.
Earhart, this is the Itasca. Come in, over.
We have an emergency. Notify all the ships in the area. Amelia Earhart's plane may be going down. We may be losing her.
That was the last verified transmission ever heard from Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan. They must have ran out of fuel, and within a minute or two, from 1,000 feet, would have had to ditch the airplane into the ocean.
Immediately, a search effort began, the largest ever mounted to look for a single plane. 10 ships, 65 airplanes, and 4,000 men covered this 250,000 square mile area around Howland Island. The search continued for 16 days. Experts agreed that Amelia's plane with its empty gas tanks would have floated for 5 to 8 hours. On the plane, Amelia and Fred had life preservers and a 2-person inflatable life raft equipped with emergency supplies so they could have been afloat for days. Experts believe Amelia went down somewhere near Howland Island. But incredibly, unconfirmed sightings have placed Amelia and Fred 2,500 miles west-northwest of Howland on Saipan in the Mariana Islands. When Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan disappeared, Saipan was an important military headquarters for the Japanese. Intent on expanding its empire, Japan was about to attack China and had begun to build up military operations on key islands in the South Pacific. July 1944, 7 years after Amelia Earhart's plane vanished, the island of Saipan was now controlled by American forces. Sergeant Thomas Devine was a member of the 244th Army Unit.
I first became aware of matter pertaining to Amelia Earhart soon after my arrival on the island. Lieutenant Liebig, who was our first lieutenant, had secured a Jeep and told me that I was to drive him to Oswego Airfield, which was a short distance away from our bivouac area.
Devine and the lieutenant drove along a heavily guarded road. They pulled up in front of a padlocked aircraft hangar.
I'm sorry, sir, this is a restricted area. Restricted to whom? With all due respect, sir, that's none of your concern.
While he waited, Thomas Devine overheard snatches of conversation from a nearby group of Marines.
We got Amelia Earhart's plane in that hangar. You guys wouldn't believe it when we found it.
Suddenly, an official in civilian clothes reprimanded the Marines.
You people want to knock off the chatter here? You understand what's going on? This is a classified project. You've come about that damn close to compromising the project right now. I'm telling you, I want you to sit down, do your jobs, and shut up. Do you understand?
As we went back, we dropped the subject because it was just a minor incident that took place. Later on that same day, I heard a roar from the airfield, but we didn't pay too much attention until suddenly it came overhead, very, very low. And you could see the markings on it. It was not a military plane. It was a civilian plane. The marking was very evident, NR-16020. We all looked up, we all wondered what in the world was going on.
Thomas Devine wrote down the identification numbers on the aircraft. They corresponded exactly to the numbers on Amelia Earhart's plane. That same evening, Tom saw the plane again. Now it was on fire.
And I was aghast to see this plane, the so-called Earhart plane, engulfed in flames. I saw that plane personally on 3 occasions that day. The last time the plane was in flames.
At about the same time, Bob Wallach was one of the Marines stationed on Saipan.
I was in the 1st Battalion, 29th Marines. We were in the 2nd wave going into Saipan. During the daytime, we had nothing to do. One of the guys was a demolition person that knew, and he thought he could blow the door off the safe, and we'd have something. We thought we were going to be millionaires, you know. But anyway, there was a briefcase that I grabbed. And I thought I had it packed full of money or something like that. To my surprise, it was something I didn't expect to see, but it was full of Amelia Earhart's papers.
Hey, Joe, come take a look at this. What do you got, Wallach? Amelia Earhart. What's this stuff doing here?
I may have only been 18 years old, but I knew I had a piece of history in my hand.
This is incredible.
Hey, I think you're gonna have to turn that stuff in.
Yeah.
Wallach turned the briefcase and its contents over to a commanding officer. He never saw it again.
That briefcase is still someplace in this country. I believe that. Because that officer that I gave it to was a high enough rank that he didn't just take it and throw it away. He had something valuable too.
I do not believe Amelia Earhart died at sea. I think Amelia Earhart survived the downing on an island in the
Buddy Brennan has been investigating the Amelia Earhart mystery for more than 11 years. In 1987, he interviewed a woman in Saipan who said she had witnessed Amelia's death. Unsolved Mysteries went to Saipan and interviewed the same woman. What follows is excerpted from both interviews.
This woman was brought ashore by the Japanese. It was said they had captured 2 spy people. The Japanese soldiers brought the spies into town. Many of us went there to see them.
I think they want us to strip.
The Japanese guards made them take off all their clothes, everything they had on their bodies. It was then we could see that one of the spies was a woman. I had never known before a woman who wore men's trousers. All the things that happened to that woman. The soldiers put her in jail. They removed her jewelry from her hands. Then the Japanese came and gave her rice. She threw it out. When they took her out of the prison, they tied her hands. They blindfolded her. I was working on a farm. I saw a Japanese motorcycle. The woman was in a little seat on the side of the motorcycle. I watched, and they took her to this place where a hole had been dug. They made her kneel in front of the hole.
Then
they shot her.
우대!
I planted a breadfruit tree near her grave.
In 1987, Buddy Brennan conducted an excavation of the gravesite. He was only allowed to dig for 12 hours.
We got down to 6.5 feet below what they said would have been the surface in 1944, which is the date Ms. Bloss gave us of having witnessed the execution. And that's where we retrieved the blindfold.
Brennan believes this tattered fragment of cloth was a blindfold worn by Amelia Earhart. However, no human remains were unearthed. What really happened in Saipan? Was Amelia Earhart executed here? Was her aircraft burned here on an American airfield? If so, who burned it and why? Or did Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan go down with their plane and perish somewhere in the vast South Pacific?
I am convinced that the most probable end to the Amelia Earhart flight ended with them running out of fuel, just like they'd said on the radio, and just like the official accident investigation report indicated from Captain Noyes on the Lexington, that they were forced to ditch northwest of Howland Island after their fuel was exhausted, and they couldn't find Howland Island because of a navigational error. Now, we know they weren't any...
Elgin Long believes Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan ran into 3 problems. The United States nautical charts Fred was using had mislocated Howland Island by 6 miles. A faulty compass on their aircraft took them 7 miles farther off course. Finally, wind drifts and related factors pushed them another 22 miles west. According to Elgin Long, Amelia and Fred ended up a full 35 miles off course.
I stick with where the airplane went down. What happened to Amelia, I'm really not positive about, and we won't know until we locate the airplane. I think if we can raise her airplane and prove once and for all the solution to the Amelia Earhart mystery, it will be something very, very worthwhile for our heritage. We can't afford to throw our heroes away.
Many believe that the mystery of Amelia Earhart could be solved simply by a deep-sea diving expedition. Perhaps so. Or perhaps Amelia Earhart is destined to remain a legendary figure, a hero suspended in time at the apex of an unsolved mystery. When we return, the chilling tale of a teenager who apparently embarked on a murderous rampage when his girlfriend broke up with him. Ray and Ruth Ann Ritter grew up in Woodstock, Illinois, a small town north of Chicago. They married in 1968 and had 3 children, Colleen, Steve, and Matthew. The Ritters were a close-knit family, strong churchgoers and community workers. When 15-year-old Colleen began to date a childhood friend, Rick Church, it seemed only natural. Colleen and Rick were both students at a small Catholic high school. At first, their relationship seemed like a typical teenage infatuation.
Hi, Rick. Hey, how are you? Good, how are you?
Good. How was school?
I first started dating Rick when I was a sophomore. At that point, he was a senior. I think I did okay on my test.
Yeah?
Yeah, I did. Rick was really good looking. He was involved in sports activities. He was real quiet, though. He had a lot of friends, but he was real quiet. No, it's not a fun position to be in.
A year after Colleen and Rick began dating, Rick went away to college. For Colleen, the romance began to cool. The waning of young love is an everyday occurrence. Fortunately, most teenage hearts mend quickly. In the case of Colleen Ritter and Rick Church, however, something went wrong. Very wrong. Rick seemed unable to accept the idea that the courtship might be over. From his college dorm, he called Colleen nearly every night, upset and on edge. No one suspected that Rick Church was coming unhinged.
Hello?
Hey, Colleen, it's me. How you doing?
Hi, Rick. I'm fine.
Yeah? What are you doing?
Oh, I have a math test. Well, listen, I really haven't studied much. I have to go.
Just called to talk to you for a second.
But you never have anything to say.
That's not true.
Look, I'm sorry. I really have to study. I'll have to call you tomorrow.
Okay, fine. Well, good luck on your math test.
Rick, I have been doing a lot of thinking.
In June of 1988, Rick came home from college to find that his parents had separated and his girlfriend had reached a decision.
So, what are you getting at?
I think we should see other people.
I'm not good enough for you?
At beginning of that summer, he became very possessive. You know, where are you going? Who are you going to be with? You know, that type of thing. And that just like crowded me too much. I couldn't stand that. You were calling me all the time.
I'm really sorry if I inconvenienced you.
You're too possessive.
What?
I found it was really hard breaking up with Rick. I still wanted to be friends. We had known each other, you know, practically all our lives. And I did consider him a good friend. So I thought maybe this just wasn't, it was like a friendship trying to turn into a romance, and it just didn't cut it. You know, it just didn't work. So then I just wanted us to be friends once again, because he really needed somebody, and I wanted to be, you know, a friend for him, but I just couldn't be his girlfriend anymore. It was too hard. Anyway, I went to this ghost.
2 months later, on the night of Saturday, August 20th, Colleen had a friend sleeping over, as did her brother Matthew. Ray and Ruth Ann Ritter were out with friends, and their other son was away.
Hello? Hi.
At 11:30 p.m., Rick Church telephoned, upset because he wanted one last Saturday night with Colleen.
I was out with some of my girlfriends. Where'd you go? He was kind of depressed. He sounded very depressed, very silent, really quiet. Like he knew something he didn't want to tell me or something. And he immediately, then I said, well, you know, don't talk to me like that. If you're going to act like this, you know, I don't want to talk to you tonight. I'll just talk to you tomorrow then. He said, well, fine. He just hung up on me. I don't know exactly how the fight started, but it ended up where he just hung up on me. I don't think there was anything really unusual about that. We had gotten into arguments before, and he had hung up on me before, and I had done the same. It wasn't unusual, I don't think, in any circumstance. It was just a basic fight.
Around 5:15 a.m., Rick Church entered the Ritters' house. What the police believe happened next is based on their investigation and eyewitness accounts. Ray and Ruth Ann Ritter were asleep in their ground floor bedroom. By 5:25 a.m., they were both dead. Upstairs, 11-year-old Matthew Ritter awoke. He was stabbed twice. Colleen frantically dialed 911. Rick broke into the room. She ran. Rick never spoke, he began to stab Colleen.
I had a cedar chest, and I was like laying on the cedar chest, just pretending I was dead so he would stop, or just trying to do anything so he would stop. I was like playing dead, and that didn't work. He kept attacking me. I told him, I just yelled out, "I love you," just so I thought maybe he would stop. I was trying anything at that point.
Rick fled when two neighbors came to Colleen's aid. Inside the house, young Matthew Ritter had managed to get to the telephone and give his address to the 911 operator. The police arrived almost immediately.
Went that way and went back inside. It's okay, I'm an EMTA.
Matthew, bloody and in shock, huddled with his friend who was unharmed. Colleen's girlfriend had also escaped uninjured. In the downstairs bedroom, they found the bodies of Colleen and Matthew's parents. Meanwhile, Rick Church had run the 12 blocks to his home and was hurriedly packing his things. At 5:45 a.m., Rick took his mother's truck and vanished. Less than a half hour had elapsed since a bloody attack on the Ritter family. The Woodstock police issued an all-points bulletin.
This was not a criminal or somebody that's hanging out on the street or anything like that. This was a kid who had gone to school here all his life and, knew a lot of people and had a lot of friends and went on to college, and then all of a sudden, was accused of a crime like this. And I would think it'd be totally out of character for somebody like this. And I really don't know today yet what the motive might have been. The speculation is the breakup, boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. To do something like this, that's really something over that, but, that's what we have at this point, the reason.
At the hospital, police put Colleen Ritter and her brother Matthew under 24-hour guard in case Rick Church showed up again. Matthew was treated and released the next day, but Colleen was critically injured with more than 20 stab wounds, most of them in the back of her head. Some of Colleen's doctors feared she would be permanently blind or suffer irreversible brain damage. 2 days later, while Colleen was still in intensive care, her parents were buried.
The hardest part throughout all of this is, I guess, not having my parents there. That's real hard. That's two of your best friends, and they're gone, so that's hard. And not being able to say goodbye because I wasn't at their funeral, that was hard. So I did that in my own way, and I still am.
Next, the story of a risky undercover operation conducted by the FBI to capture Colombian drug lords. In South America, the country of Colombia continues to fight for its life in the ugly war against drugs. The Colombian drug cartels have taken full credit for making terrorism and political assassination a way of life in their country, and have made no secret of the fact that they want to increase their power in the United States.
The cartels, the leaders of the cartels, the members of the cartels in South America, and their representatives in the United States are particularly vicious. There is no premium on human life. These people make the mafia look like Boy Scouts. They are totally violent. They will kill almost for the sake of killing.
Colombian drug cartels bring in more than $5 billion a year. In an effort to stem the tide of the cartel's influence inside our borders, the FBI 3 years ago mounted one of the riskiest sting operations in United States history. Because drug traffickers need, above all else, efficient and unbuggable telecommunications, the FBI set its trap in an electronics store. The sting operation began in May of 1987 in Miami, Florida. Its center was the unassuming RA Communications Company, which sold sophisticated telephone systems and electronic devices. The first customers were quick to arrive.
That's some information on your cellular phones.
Okay, well, we sell and service cellular phones. We also service beepers and sell beepers. What is it that you're interested in?
The receptionist, Sandy, and the manager, Jay, were both highly trained FBI agents.
These gentlemen would like to know about our cellular phone system.
¿Cómo no? ¿Con qué te puedo ayudar, caballero? Chico, ¿me pudieras dar alguna información sobre los teléfonos móviles que tenían aquí ustedes?
Bueno, Sandy, do me a favor. Take messages.
Okay.
The drug runners wanted the latest in car phones, ship-to-shore radios, beepers, remote phones, and airplane telecommunications devices.
Mejor que ese teléfono no se puede conseguir. También te voy a enseñar unos beepers, que son lo mejor que hay en el mercado.
We did everything we could to provide them. By so doing, of course, we knew how they were operating, we knew what frequencies they were operating on, and it gave us the leg up.
Basically, we're talking about 40.
The drug traffickers' overriding need was for untraceable means of communication. The word on the street was RA had the best. All the employees at RA who were cooperating fully with the FBI were men the drug runners trusted.
Now listen, this is the important thing, okay? Talk to me, Eddie. I'm gonna talk to the man in the moon, right? Now listen, I gotta know that the man in the moon's wife isn't listening in. You see
Okay.
what I'm saying?
What you want to know is if this phone is tappable, right? And I'm telling you, listen to me now and trust me. There's no way you can tap into this phone.
In your experience, there's no...
I'm an expert, I just told you. This is the top of the line, state-of-the-art unit.
We held ourselves out as being a service component of the drug business. We made it attractive for them to remain, talk, converse, and that became a place to congregate. It took on an aura of a clubhouse type of effect. Our clientele, probably 6 months into the operation, was entirely drug traffickers.
Soon the really major players in the drug underworld began to drop into the RA clubhouse. One of them was Colombia national Jesus Peñalver, known by the FBI to handle regular shipments of cocaine worth as much as $50 million.
Jesus came to trust the undercover agents and cooperative parties working in RA Communications. He bragged that he had been involved in some violent incidents in Colombia, South America, talked about his desire to flood the United States with cocaine. He freely discussed with us the movement from Colombia, South America, through the Bahamas and into the United States.
Inside the clubhouse, Peñalver felt safe enough to make drug deals using the company phone. His conversations were videotaped and monitored by FBI agents.
Correcto, cambio fuera. No joda tanto con eso, hombre. Okay, cambio fuera.
Peñalver's cronies joined him, and in the clubhouse, it was not uncommon to see as many as 3 different drug traffickers doing business simultaneously into the early morning hours. One of those traffickers was cartel operative Julio Marco Cruz.
Oye, ¿qué está haciendo las cosas? ¿Este Julio?
Julio Marco Cruz was a customer, a purchaser, someone who was going to receive in excess of 100 kilos of cocaine.
Cruz had arranged to receive his large cocaine shipment in early November on a boat called the Tremolo. Through RA's personnel, the FBI discovered the Tremolo's route in time to alert the United States Coast Guard. On November 19th, 1988, the Tremolo entered U.S. waters, and the Coast Guard moved in to intercept the massive shipment of cocaine.
I want you and your crew to step to the far side of the boat. We'll come on board.
Under the Tremolo's floorboards, agents discovered over 800 pounds of cocaine. Their street value, nearly $40 million. The next day, Cruz showed up at RA Communications accompanied by his bodyguards. Amazingly, he seemed to know nothing about the Tremolo's capture. Jay made a quick decision. To keep his cover intact, he told Cruz about the drug bust on the tremolo.
Tell him. I read it in the paper, bro.
Es una mentira, man. ¿Cómo tú me vas a decir una cosa así?
Lo leí en el periódico,
Cruz was infuriated, but he never suspected that the men who told him about the bust were in fact responsible for it. He continued to use the same telephones he had used before, and the FBI continued to gather information.
Mira, este es Julio. Esta noticia que yo recibí ahora que me están diciendo que me tumbaron el bote mío.
It appeared as if the RA sting might go on indefinitely. But during the fall of 1988, Jesus Peñalver had begun forcing his attentions on Sandy.
Hi, Joe. Nada, working hard.
The FBI feared that Sandy and their other agents might be in jeopardy.
The agents who are involved in undercover activity are exposed to potential danger at any given time.
If the circumstances were different, okay?
And really, we very closely reviewed and evaluated with the FBI headquarters and the other agencies who participated that we had accomplished a great deal and it was the appropriate time to bring forward the matters to a prosecutive phase.
On December 6, 1988, the FBI brought charges against nearly 100 drug traffickers. RA Communications was shut down.
We had a significant amount of arrests to undertake. We had a very detailed plan. Of the 93 people indicted throughout the United States, we were able to apprehend 68 some people.
Next week on Unsolved Mysteries. In 1965, one of the first black deputy sheriffs in Louisiana was gunned down in cold blood while on duty. 24 years later, new leads prompted the FBI to reopen the case. For every mystery, there is someone, somewhere, who knows the truth. Perhaps it's you.
This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
In Arizona, a successful real estate entrepreneur named Chuck Morgan was found shot to death. Some believe this was a contract killing ordered by organized crime. The only significant clue is a cryptic list Morgan scribbled on the back of a $2 bill. 1965. The South was embroiled in the painful civil rights struggle. In rural Louisiana, a young black deputy sheriff was brutally murdered by unknown gunmen. Today, new evidence has surfaced and the case reopened by the FBI. In Tacoma, an unusual and heartwarming story concerning a young epilepsy victim and the dog who saved her life. Does a mysterious sixth sense enable some animals to actually predict epileptic seizures? This is the only photograph of a bold bank robber who has coolly committed a series of successful holdups without ever being identified. Perhaps it will help you put him behind bars. We'll also tell you how you helped shed light on the bizarre case of a demented arsonist who set fire to a house and in Callasee videotaped the blaze. Thanks to our viewers, 2 suspects, both teenagers, are now in custody. Join me once again. You may be able to help solve a mystery. Tucson, Arizona, March 22nd, 1977. Chuck Morgan left as usual to drive 2 of his 4 daughters to school. Riding the crest of Tucson's real estate boom, Morgan had become president of his own escrow agency. From the outside, his life looked ideal. The hard-working businessman, devoted husband and father. But in 1977, Chuck Morgan had become a potential witness in a state land fraud case involving a known organized crime boss. And suddenly, on March 22nd, Morgan disappeared. 3 days later, Chuck Morgan returned home at 2 in the morning.
I was in bed, and the dog started barking. And I got up, and there was a thump against the back door. I went to the door and opened it, and there was Chuck. And he was missing a shoe. He had one plastic handcuff around one ankle, and his hands still had them on.
What happened to you? Mom, what happened to Daddy? Just go back to your rooms. Go back to your rooms.
He kept motioning to his throat because he hadn't said a word.
Can you talk? Can you write?
And he shook his head yes, so I went and got a tablet and pen.
Hallucinogenic?
He wrote that his throat had been tainted with a hallucinogenic drug and that the drug could drive him irrevocably insane or destroy his nervous system and kill him. And he wanted the car moved. He wanted it moved immediately because he said that he didn't want them to know he was home. He wouldn't tell me who they were.
I'm gonna call the police.
And I wanted to call a doctor, and I wanted to call the police.
No.
And he was adamant.
But why?
And then he wrote out that that would be signing a death warrant for the entire family.
For 1 week, Ruth Morgan nursed her husband, feeding him water with an eyedropper. Before his voice returned, he began to allude to a secret identity, agent for the federal government.
He wrote, they took my Treasury identification. And that's the first I'd heard of it.
Your Treasury ID is missing? What Treasury ID?
He wouldn't talk to me about it. He wrote. He had been working for them for about 2 or 3 years. And that was it.
Who was responsible for this bizarre kidnapping episode in Chuck Morgan's life? It is possible that Morgan really was a secret agent, dealing with organized crime so he could pass information along to the government. But Morgan may also, like so many others in Arizona during the 70s, have become caught up himself in the web of organized crime. Lured by the mild climate and a confused and corrupt criminal justice system, the Mafia reportedly established Arizona as a narcotics pipeline and a haven for swindlers and money laundering. Led by former New York Don Joseph Bonanno, more than 500 established racketeers set up shop here during the 70s. Their influence began a slew of gangland-style killings, culminating in the slaying of investigative reporter Don Bowles. What made Arizona particularly attractive to crime syndicates was a unique state law which allowed them to buy up land through numbered blind trust accounts. That way, they themselves could remain anonymous, providing a nearly foolproof way to launder money. Chuck Morgan did real estate escrow work for at least one Mafia family, and they may also have begun using him to do escrow work for purchases of gold bullion and platinum, a more convenient way to launder money.
It is very easy to get in over your head. And I suspect that over the years, Mr. Morgan was in that kind of a situation. He was a straight businessman who probably got a little too close to the flame.
Well, the sales agreement looks all in order. The legal description of the parcel, the amount.
He was around the edges of a couple of fairly large organized crime groups in Arizona at that time.
Ourselves a deal here.
The records begin early '73, and it would indicate he was doing perhaps upwards of $1 billion with a B.
Charles Morgan.
Escrow work. in bullion and platinum. Transactions that only existed on paper. There was never any gold, at that level at least. And money changed hands and moved through escrow accounts in Los Angeles and Atlanta banks, and that's how the monies were legitimized.
Chuck mentioned to me once that there was money laundering going on in this town, but nothing that he himself was involved in. He told me the less the girls and I knew, the better off we would be.
After his kidnapping, Chuck Morgan began exhibiting a justifiable paranoia. He wore a bulletproof vest and insisted on driving his daughters to and from school. He informed the school that no one else was authorized to pick the girls up. All his precautions were to no avail. 2 months after his first disappearance, Chuck Morgan vanished again.
The last morning that anybody saw him, he went up to his parents' house, and he was talking to his father and told him that if anything happened to him, there was a letter explaining why, how, and who. The letters never surfaced.
9 days after her husband had disappeared, Ruth Morgan
Hello?
received a mysterious phone call.
Yes.
The caller was a woman who gave Ruth a reference from the Bible.
This woman said, "Ruthie?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Chuck is all right. Ecclesiastes 12, 1 through 8. And then she hung up. And the Horners go,
The passage reads in part,
"Forever the silver
"Men are afraid of a high place and of terrors on the road. Remember him before the silver cord is broken and the golden bowl is crushed. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it." 2 days after Ruth's cryptic phone message, her husband's body was discovered, his bulletproof vest ironically in place. He had died from a single bullet fired at close range into the back of his head. The bullet came from his own .357 Magnum, which was lying beside him. The investigators also found a piece of paper with directions to the murder site jotted down in Chuck's handwriting, and a pair of sunglasses which definitely did not belong to him. They made one additional discovery. Apparently, Chuck Morgan had clipped a $2 bill inside his underwear. Written on the bill were 7 Spanish names beginning with the letters A through G. Above them was a notation, Ecclesiastes 12, with the verses 1 through 8 marked by arrows drawn on the bill's serial number. This was the same reference the mysterious female caller had given to Ruth Morgan. On the back of the bill, the signers of the Declaration of Independence were numbered 1 through 7, and a crude map was drawn.
The map is of some roads that do exist between Tucson and the Mexican border, going out to a place called Robles Junction and then going south to a little town called Sasabe. A ranch is identified down there where there are landing strips. It's an area that very likely would be involved in smuggling. And there are some indications that if Mr. Morgan was involved in some movements of real gold, that some of it, in fact, may have been coming across from Mexico in that fashion.
Despite the puzzling evidence, many in the sheriff's department believed Chuck Morgan's death was a suicide. They claimed he had shot himself in the back of the head.
There is no way Chuck would have committed suicide. And if he had even contemplated suicide, he would have left a letter for his girls and for me.
It is not a very normal place to shoot oneself as a suicide. And bear in mind, he's wearing a bulletproof vest at the time. I've never seen in all my years as a journalist a fella take himself out in the desert wearing a bulletproof vest and shoot himself in the back of the head.
I was familiar with the intelligence officers working intelligence for the sheriff's department at the time. I had some conversation with them about this case. They thought it was a homicide and gang-related. They left the sheriff's department. I don't know if they left because of what they detected in this case or another case or a combination of cases, but they indicated they were in fear of their lives and actually left law enforcement. 2 of them left the continental U.S.
2 days after Chuck Morgan's death, an anonymous woman spoke to a member of the Pima County Sheriff's Department on the telephone. She said Chuck had come to meet her at a local motel just before he died. The woman called herself Green Eyes and said she was the same one who had called Chuck's wife, quoting the passage from Ecclesiastes. Green Eyes also said that in the motel, Chuck showed her a briefcase containing thousands of dollars in cash. He claimed the money would buy him out of a gang contract that had been put on his life.
How much do you have in there?
Hopefully $60,000.
Why do you need so much?
If the information that Green Eyes provided is accurate, it is, in a very perverse sense, remotely possible that Mr. Morgan paid for his own murder.
The theory goes that organized crime put the word out that they wanted Chuck Morgan dead. A hitman then told Chuck, who came up with the money to buy the hitman off. But when the two of them met in the desert, the hitman killed Chuck anyway, then took his money.
There is a great likelihood that Mr. Morgan was, in fact, doing something with the government. And I think somebody blew his cover, and I think he got killed.
Go over there and kneel down.
I think this was a guy who was extremely naive about a lot of things. The sort of associations he suddenly found himself in, and maybe was even asked to put himself in by people in the U.S. government.
Three weeks after her husband's death, Ruth Morgan had two visitors claiming to be government officials.
Jack Richards, we're special agents for the FBI.
They opened and closed their identification very fast. They said they wanted to come in and look through the house. I never thought at the time to ask them for a search warrant. They never said what they were looking for. To this day, I don't even know what they were looking for.
The two men tore Ruth Morgan's house apart, searching for something which they seemed unable to find. Because she was so rattled, Ruth did not take down their names. No one knows for sure if the two men really were from the FBI. Don Devereaux contacted the Bureau to get more information on the Morgan case.
When I made a formal Freedom of Information Act request to the FBI, they'd never heard of Mr. Morgan. Despite the fact that they obviously opened an investigation, despite the fact the FBI interviewed Mr. Morgan's attorney, they were all over this thing like a blanket for a while. But now they've never heard of the guy. He never existed. No card, no file, no nothing.
Was Chuck Morgan doing undercover work for the government? Or the clues he left behind on the $2 bill an attempt to pass coded messages to the FBI? 12 years later, Ruth Morgan is still trying to unravel the strange clues left by her husband. The passage from Ecclesiastes haunts her.
While the sun or the light or the moon or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain. In the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble. I don't know what it means. There's a message there somewhere. I know there is, but I don't know what it means.
I think the $2 bill provides the basis for some kind of cryptography. I think there are the bases of some kind of a code there. What seems to be missing, however, is the document that the $2 bill would unlock. I think we need a companion piece to really make ultimate sense out of the $2 bill.
Is there a document that explains the mysterious death of Chuck Morgan, tying all the cryptic clues together? Were the two men calling themselves federal agents searching for the document when they ransacked the Morgan home? For Ruth Morgan, only one thing is certain.
He was murdered. Somebody held a gun to his head and killed him. I don't know why. I may never know why. And I probably will never know who. But I know somebody did it.
He was the husband of someone. He was the father of 4 children. Was he a good guy? Was he a bad guy? If he was quietly providing assistance to the U.S. government in monitoring the activities of one or more major organized crime families, he wasn't a villain. He was a good guy. And they need to know that.
When the segment aired, we received hundreds of calls relating to Morgan's death. According to Devereaux, who continued his investigation, many turned out to be productive leads. 3 months later, a draftsman at a Phoenix computer company, Doug Johnston, was found dead in his car outside his office. Johnston had been shot once behind the ear, and police have suggested it was a possible suicide. Curiously, Johnson worked across the street from Don Devereaux's office and drove a car that almost exactly matched Devereaux's. In fact, Devereaux is now convinced that the bullet which killed Doug Johnston was intended for him.
I got a phone call from a journalist friend of mine from Washington, D.C., who had been briefed by a high-level CIA official that, in fact, that was a botched hit, that some people thought they were hitting me when they shot the guy across the street. And, in fact, there was still a contract outstanding, and it was coming around again, that whatever I had done was still a problem to someone.
Two other sources in the intelligence community have confirmed to Don Devereaux that he is a target for murder, and that the next attempt will be made to look like an accident. We'll bring you a full report on this intriguing case in the near future. Recently, we profiled a story that generated more than 1,600 phone calls from our viewers. The case involved a fire that was apparently started by an arsonist, then recorded on videotape by the suspect.
This is what I've been doing on a week's vacation.
This footage is from the actual videotape found on August 15, 1989, by a Stockton, California family.
I've never run across anything as eerie as this tape. It frightened me. As a matter of fact, I thought about it that night when I went to bed.
Despite a frame-by-frame analysis of the video, investigators were unable to match the fire recorded on the tape with any suspected arson fires reported in the state of California. The burning structure appeared to be a wood-frame house, perhaps in a rural area. Because fire engines do arrive, investigators felt certain that somewhere a report of the blaze was on file.
I think the person who made this videotape and is responsible for the fire will, without a doubt in my mind, continue to set fires. And the person needs to be apprehended and stopped before his fires become more destructive.
Update: Redwood City, California, 60 miles west of Stockton. Within minutes of our broadcast, several viewers from Redwood City called our telecenter and identified the location of the house seen burning on the videotape.
As we were sitting here and we looked at the film on the TV, we realized with utter shock that it was the house behind us that was on TV. And our family was scared, to say the least, because we didn't realize that the film even existed. And it was no mistake in my mind at all that that was the house that was behind us by watching the videotape on TV. And we called in to Unsolved Mysteries and gave all the information.
The arson occurred on August 15, 1988. The house that was destroyed was under construction at the time. Today it has been rebuilt. Incredibly, on the night of the blaze, Woodside Fire Captain Don Dellinges also videotaped the fire.
While I was setting up the command post, directing companies in to extinguish the fire, I had set up my video camera to film the fire for training and investigation purposes.
By comparing Captain Dellinge's tape with a video shot by the arsonist, investigators were able to confirm beyond a doubt the fire's location.
Some of the calls received led us to a 17-year-old Woodside youth. We interviewed that youth. Through that interview, it led us to a 19-year-old Redwood City youth. He was arrested and interviewed and subsequently admitted burning the house, taking the video, and was the one who talked on the videotape.
Our biggest hope was that maybe we would find an area or location of the fire. We never dreamed that we'd get the results that we did.
One of the two suspects is currently awaiting trial on charges of arson. Investigators believe that between them, the two suspects may also be responsible for as many as 25 arson fires in the Redwood City area over the past 3 years. In the early 1960s, the American South was at a crossroads. Selma, Birmingham, and Greensboro were just a few of the battlegrounds where the desire for racial equality became a demand. With segregation starting to crumble, blacks and whites faced off in tense, often violent confrontations. In Washington Parish, Louisiana, the black community began to push for integration of the sheriff's department. In response, 2 black deputies were appointed. On June 1st, 1964, 46-year-old David Creed Rogers and 34-year-old O'Neill Moore became the first black law enforcement officers in Washington Parish.
It was just a great day, knowing my husband was the first Negro deputy. He got in his car and he turned his radio on and reported in, and we were just tickled.
At that time, feelings were running very high. And people, some people, not all people, was against the blacks taking a part in any part of law enforcement or anything.
A year later, Deputy Sheriff O'Neill Moore was gunned down while on duty in a racially motivated attack. On June 6, 1965, Moore was laid to rest, an unheralded martyr of the civil rights struggle. His killer was never identified. Moore's partner, Creed Rogers, lost an eye in the attack, but survived.
I would like to know who did it, for my sakes and everybody else, to know who the neighbors are. I know I wouldn't want to live next door to anybody, black or white, whatever, was dirty enough to do something like that.
Today, Southerners are justifiably proud of the enormous strides made by both blacks and whites in putting the past behind them. But 25 years ago, times were different. Black deputies such as O'Neill Moore and Creed Rogers were not allowed to confront whites, much less arrest them. But despite the fact that they were working in a white world that barely tolerated their presence, O'Neill and Creed persevered. They promised themselves that they would not let their community down. It was a night of June 2nd, 1965. After a year on duty, O'Neill and Creed had come to expect harassment, so they were not surprised when a pickup truck began to tailgate them.
It ain't so bad at night, because you get the whole gut, you wake up in the morning.
We got on Peters Hill, about 2 miles north of Orlando. We saw a fire on the left of the road. So we made a U-turn to inspect the fire. It was wooded area, see if there was fire getting out.
What do you think? Hell, it ain't nothing but old trash fire. Come on.
We checked the fire and saw it was just a trash fire. It wasn't no danger. So we made a U-turn and proceeded on south. And this truck had pulled over to the right. And as we passed them, the truck pulled out and began to follow us. It was, appeared to be a dark truck, black. I noticed it had a white grill and a rebel tag on the front. So as we headed south, it continued to follow us. Car hit the tree, and they passed still shooting, and evidently the last shot got him. It knocked him over on me.
You guys all right?
Hearing the shots, a local resident ran to the accident scene.
My wife called the police.
He found O'Neill Moore dead and Creed Rogers badly injured. He stood guard until police arrived. Chief Deputy Sheriff Doyle Holliday arrived a few minutes later. he began an investigation that would consume the next several months.
When I got up there, I found Deputy O'Neill Moore dead and Deputy Creed Rogers all shot up.
What's that? What? A black truck.
Creed, he described the truck
Did you recognize it?
right down to the last detail.
You're gonna be okay. It's all right.
And I immediately put out an APB on that truck. In less than about 30 or 45 minutes, they called me from my office and told me that they had apprehended a truck of that description in Tylertown, Mississippi. The truck fit the description to a T of what Creed had told me, with the exceptions of the side rails. There were no side rails on the truck at the time of apprehension.
The truck was stopped just 20 miles from the scene of the shooting. The driver was arrested, but was soon released on a $25,000 bond. The charges were later dismissed due to lack of evidence. Suspicion naturally focused on the Ku Klux Klan, but the local chapter immediately denied any involvement. Racial tensions increased. In Washington Parish, the sheriff refused to give in to the pressure. O'Neill Moore was replaced by another black deputy.
They really didn't accomplish anything because when they was trying to get rid of Creed and O'Neill, it didn't frighten them. They just give others more get up and go about them. It really give them more courage.
They wasn't going to get the black deputies off of the sheriff's department because it wasn't any time after that until the sheriff called me one day and told me to go and hire another one.
Well, we can't get on it before first thing in the morning.
Doyle Holliday continued to pursue his investigation. 2 weeks after the shooting, the violence came to his home.
After I got through talking to the sheriff, I went over and sat down on the couch. That's when the shot rang. And I hollered, "Get down," and I grabbed my gun that was laying on the table and went out the door, fired. And they immediately took off. They might have been stepping on somebody's toes, I don't know. But I don't know why they picked me out, singled me out, because even had they backed me down, which they didn't, they still had the FBI and the state police to contend with.
The local population refused to cooperate with the FBI or local authorities, despite a $25,000 reward from the governor of Louisiana. The case was deemed inactive in 1967.
25 years ago, the Klan was so strong that the people would not open their mouth. They would not give you a lead on anything for fear of their house being burnt or some member of their family being hurt or something to that effect. Back then, they didn't want anything to do with the FBI, the state police, or the local police.
In June of 1987, the FBI field office in New Orleans was contacted by one informant and received letters from 2 other anonymous sources. They claimed to identify the people responsible for O'Neill Moore's murder. As a result of this new information, the case was reopened.
One of the 2 letters is very specific on identifying individuals that were within the pickup truck and the getaway route of the pickup truck involved. We have looked at the 3 individuals specifically mentioned in this anonymous letter, have interviewed their families or anyone that may be associated with these 3 individuals. Let me write this down now. What did you say?
The FBI does not currently have enough information to make any arrests. However, they do believe that the killers belong to the Klan.
That's what's happening. We feel that it was members of the Ku Klux Klan that took part in this shooting, but they did it on their own. They didn't allow other individuals to have knowledge of what they were going to do.
It has been 25 years since O'Neill Moore and his partner took their last ride together. Creed Rogers refused to be frightened away from his chosen career. and in 1988, he retired as a full captain from the Washington Parish Sheriff's Department.
I still wonder who could have done it. That'll be with me forever. Who could have done that? You know, it's when people try to kill you and you hadn't did anything to them, why, that never leaves your mind. Sometimes you wonder if they're still out there, still wanting to try it. It's a bad feeling.
I think that a lot of people that was involved back then are getting on up in years like myself, and they don't want to go face the Almighty with that on their conscience. And I think before the final day, somebody's going to get it off of their chest.
The death of O'Neill Moore was a crime against every American. That his killers are still at large after 25 years is a further affront. Their capture will not ease the pain felt by O'Neill's family and friends, but it will certainly prove that while justice may not always be blind, it does have a long memory. When we return, the story of a remarkable dog who helped save the life of an epilepsy victim by predicting her seizures. Our next story is a unique and heartwarming mystery. It deals with a bond between people and animals and the amazing sixth sense some animals possess when it comes to helping and protecting their owners. Minneapolis, Minnesota, December 4th, 1984, 2 a.m. 15 minutes earlier, a drunk driver had run a red light and collided with a car driven by 19-year-old Victoria Doroshenko. Victoria was left unconscious and suffering from multiple head injuries.
Before the accident, I had a perfect life for a teenager. After the accident, I lost everything. I couldn't go back to school. I lost my job. I was in and out of the hospital so many times that there was no way that I could even function with a normal life. I felt really lost. I felt like somebody had taken away my life for what life I had after the accident.
Victoria was plagued by headaches and periodic blackouts. A year and a half later, she moved to Tacoma, Washington, hoping to put the accident and her injuries behind her. Then in August of 1986, while she was already hospitalized, Victoria suffered a violent seizure. The symptoms were clear. Victoria had epilepsy.
Is she breathing? Yeah, let's get her on her side. Oxygen?
In her automobile accident, brain cells had been damaged, disrupting normal activity and causing seizures. For Victoria, the prognosis was grim.
When my seizures were at their worst, I was having up to 24 a day, big ones, and in between the big ones, I was having about 10 little ones. The doctors didn't think that I was going to live very much longer.
The severity of Victoria's seizures left her completely incapacitated. She fell often, re-injuring her head, which only induced more seizures. She was confined to a wheelchair and required round-the-clock care. Because Victoria's lungs filled with fluid during and after the seizures, death was a constant threat. Her situation seemed hopeless.
You take care of yourself now.
I couldn't do anything. I couldn't leave the house. When I did leave the house, I had to have enough people around me that could pick me up or carry me if need be or whatever. If I was having a seizure, I had to be strapped in to somewhere because the seizures were so violent that I would throw myself around and injure myself. I wasn't awake most of the time. When I was awake, I was really depressed. I didn't really want to live.
Victoria would find help in an unlikely place. The Purdy Correctional Center for Women, a prison 25 miles outside Tacoma. There, the state of Washington has set up a special program. Under the guidance of a professional, the inmates train dogs rescued from the pound as companions and aids for the handicapped. The dogs learn to open and close doors, pick up a telephone receiver, pull wheelchairs, fetch things like clothing and hairbrushes. In 1987, Victoria heard about the program and went to the prison. It was a decision that would save her life.
Hi, Vicki. This is Chase.
I was hoping for a dog that could help me in my daily living skills. And I was real lonely. I didn't have a life. I didn't have a social life, so I thought maybe that a dog would help.
Want to get to know him a little better?
When Victoria arrived for her interview, inmate trainers were working in the room with 2 dogs, both golden retrievers. One of the dogs had been chosen for Victoria.
That day, when I was out at the program, I ended up having a major seizure.
Sherry!
And the dog that they were originally training for me just walked away from me and didn't care.
The second dog in the room, whose name was Harley, defied his trainer's commands and did respond.
When Vicki started seizuring and Harley went to her and laid down with her, you know, everybody in the room was astounded. You know, the dog was doing what we'd hoped he could learn to do before we ever hoped he could learn to do it. He somehow knew.
When I woke up from my seizure, I woke up and his head was laying on me, and he was looking at me like all sad, and he knew something was wrong. As soon as I started petting him, I think he realized that everything was okay. He started wagging his tail, and it was from there on, I knew that that was my dog, and I knew it was gonna work. He was my partner from then on.
No one could explain why Harley responded to Victoria during her seizure. The prison program had discovered another dog which showed a special sensitivity to epileptics. Again, with no explanation. Why do certain animals appear to establish this immediate sympathetic bond? For the medical community, this question is an intriguing one. For Victoria Doroshenko, it was a question of life and death. Once Harley was with Victoria full-time, her anxiety diminished and the frequency of her seizures decreased dramatically. Victoria's doctors allowed her to resume classes at a local community college. Harley was Victoria's constant companion.
I was at Tacoma Community College, and I was walking across campus, and he all of a sudden started acting real funny. He didn't want to cooperate. He didn't want to listen to me.
What is it, boy? What is it, boy? Calm down. Calm down. Come on. Shh, calm down. Come on. Let's go. Let's go. Come on.
Harley was a real laid-back dog. He wasn't rambunctious like that, or rambunctious. So when he started acting that way, I really didn't know what was happening.
Excuse me, can I sit down here? Yes. Thank you. I'm not feeling so well. Can I do something for you? No, I just want to sit here for a while.
Harley calmed down once Victoria was safely inside a classroom. 5 minutes later, she had a major seizure. Amazingly, it appeared to Victoria and to others present that Harley had somehow known Victoria was going to have a seizure. His barking and strange behavior had been a signal for her to go to a safe place.
When I realized Harley could predict my seizures ahead of time, I was so thrilled. I knew that I was saved.
Coming on. He always exhibited the same aberrant behavior, giving Victoria 15 to 45 minutes notice before the seizure was about to strike.
So after that, the bond and the trust and the love and the dependency grew and grew and grew until there was no comparing it. We were each other. We became like one, a shadow.
Harley changed Victoria's life dramatically. She now felt comfortable enough to leave her house whenever she wanted. She began to interact with other people again. If she had a seizure, Harley always stayed by her side. He sensed danger and kept her away from traffic if a seizure was coming on. For the first time since her accident, Victoria enjoyed the comfort and security of a normal life.
Modern technology and physicians, doctors, and none of us can predict when a seizure will occur or how many seizures a person will have. These dogs can.
They can tell beforehand when a seizure will occur. They can warn the person, which is an incredible phenomena, so that the person can feel safe, they can be safe, they can have the comfort of having a dog with them at all times. Because the anxiety of having a seizure is with someone all the time.
I can never repay him or show the devotion I have for him from what he's done for me.
In June of 1990, Harley became ill. Veterinarians could do nothing, and in July, Harley died.
There's no words to describe how I felt about Harley. He gave me a life, and a life is more than you could ever give anybody.
The Epilepsy Institute has received reports of 15 other dogs that seem to be able to predict epileptic seizures. 6 of these animals came from the Purdy Correctional Center for Women. No one can explain why certain dogs seem to have an innate sensitivity to epileptics. For the victims of epilepsy whose quality of life is so greatly improved by these dogs, no explanation is necessary. They are happy to accept this particular unsolved mystery at face value. Next, the story of a crook who pulled off a series of daring bank robberies. Finally, he has been captured on film. On September 19, 1987, a well-dressed man entered a Spokane, Washington bank.
May I help you?
Stand up and move away from the desk, quickly. Come on, move over there. To the counter. Both of you, back away from the counter. Quickly! Don't touch any alarms. Do exactly as you're told. You! Get over here with the others. No tricks. No fast moves.
The robber was calm, in control, seemingly prepared for any eventuality.
Take them out slowly.
He even showed the terrified bank employees a police scanner, claiming that he would know if they managed to alert the law.
I'll know about it. Move!
The robber ignored the easy money sitting in the teller's drawers. Instead, he ordered everyone into the vault.
Hurry it up.
In his first robbery, he stole more than $100,000.
Hurry up!
It was over in less than 5 minutes. The robber left no fingerprints behind, and even managed to avoid being photographed.
The reason for that is the way he very quickly got control of the situation prevented any photographs from being obtained. Between this first bank robbery in September of 1987 and the present, he has robbed 4 more banks here in Spokane, using very similar method.
On August 30th, 1988, the bandit stole $14,000 from another Spokane bank and received an unexpected bonus.
A die pack was given to the robber, which went off very shortly after he left the bank, within seconds of him leaving the bank. Obviously, that caused a commotion on the street, and a witness did observe that commotion, and as a result of that, saw him get into a vehicle and make his escape.
After another robbery in November of 1988, bank employees were able to help create composites of the bandit. But these sketches were no substitute for photographs. Amazingly, he had still managed to avoid the omnipresent bank cameras. But on June 6, 1989, when he paid a visit to Spokane's Horizon Federal Credit Union, his luck changed. This time, frightened but resourceful bank tellers stood up to threats.
We said hi, and he said hi, and he walked up to the counter and pulled out his gun and put on sunglasses at the same time, and then told us that he wanted to go into the vault and get the money. He had one of the girls hold the bag while I got the money out, put the money in the bag, and he told us to empty out the teller drawers. He went to one drawer at a time, and when we were emptying them out, that we, pulled all the money out. And there's a bill trap underneath, some of the bills. And we pulled that from underneath the bill trap, which triggered the alarm.
The camera was also triggered. For the first time, a robber was captured on film.
And I was really scared when I pulled the bill trap. I thought, if this guy knew that I pulled it, I'm in trouble. And I just knew that I had to do it, though. There was nothing else I could do.
Getting a photo in this robbery was a big step forward for us in our investigation. Up till this point, all we had were witness descriptions of the bank robber. Now we have an actual photograph, and a very good photograph, to work with to help us identify him. It did result in us linking him to 3 additional bank robberies as a suspect in Tucson, Arizona. So that was, again, a major step forward in determining the scope of what he's been doing, as well as an aid to identification.
The robber appears to be between 35 and 45, 6 feet to 6 feet 2 inches tall, and weighs between 200 and 220 pounds. He seems tanned and healthy, and the FBI believes he may live in the Southwest, commuting to banks in the Pacific Northwest. In order to protect their employees, the Horizon Federal Credit Union has transferred those involved in the holdup to new locations and have redesigned their internal security. Meanwhile, the robber has been busy. Since 1987, the elusive robber has allegedly held up at least 9 banks, 6 in the Pacific Northwest and 3 in the Southwest. His last known heist was in April of 1990. Unbeknownst to him, this time he was captured on videotape. These are still frames taken from the videotape. At 10:30 a.m., a bandit strolled into a Tacoma, Washington bank and walked out with a substantial amount of cash. Next week on Unsolved Mysteries, the tragic story of Norman Ladner, a 17-year-old Mississippi boy who died from a gunshot wound to the head. The police say suicide. The parents say murder. In Santa Fe, New Mexico, the legend of a miraculous staircase built in a tiny chapel by a mysterious and unknown carpenter. For over a century, visitors have been dazzled by his handiwork and baffled by his identity. In Oklahoma, a brutal murder took the life of truck driver Dwayne McCorkindale. Perhaps you can help identify his killers. For every mystery, there is someone, somewhere, who knows the truth. Perhaps that someone is watching. Perhaps it's you.
This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
In Mississippi, a hike in the woods ends in tragedy when 17-year-old Norman Ladner is shot and killed. The local coroner rules the death a suicide. Norman Ladner's parents are convinced that their son was murdered. At a lonely highway rest stop, truck driver Dwayne McCorkindale was brutally gunned down in cold blood for $25. Perhaps you can help find his killers. More than a century ago, a mysterious carpenter arrived at a tiny chapel in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He left behind a wondrous legacy, a magnificent spiral staircase, and vanished. Was he just an itinerant craftsman, or, as the nuns believed, God's answer to their prayers? Nylene Marshall disappeared during a picnic 7 years ago. She is now 12, and a man who claims to be holding her has mailed taunting letters to the authorities. Also tonight, a poignant update on our story about a 7-year-old girl who made a solemn vow to a sick friend 21 years ago. Thanks to our viewers, Nikki Crowder has finally fulfilled her promise, and we filmed their joyous reunion. Join me for another edition of Unsolved Mysteries. Norman Charles Ladner of Picayune, Mississippi, was a third child and eldest son in a family of 7. He was a senior in high school, a good student, and a skilled craftsman with his own workshop in the family barn. On August the 21st, 1989, Norman left his parents' country store to go hunting on the family farm. It was a muggy summer day that apparently began like any other.
Norman knew our property very well. It's fenced on all 4 sides, even though it's 122 acres. It has some were pasture land, but about 60 acres or more of timber and woods. So he knew most every foot of it. He'd walked it a number of times.
He loved to fish. He loved to hunt. He loved to be among the wild animals, the squirrels. He would come back so excited when he would see a young deer in the back pasture. It was just his fascination and love of being out there where it was peaceful and quiet.
Norman would always be back by 7 to 7:30 in the afternoon or in the evening, without fail, to help sweep up and mop up the store and restock the coolers. And about 7 o'clock, I began to get worried about him because he was very punctual, and it was the most unusual. You could almost set your clock on him. That's the type of young man he was, very punctual.
Charlotte, Norman's not back yet, and I'm getting a little worried. Yeah, I went down to the barn. He's not there either. Look, bring the dog and meet me at the farm. We'll go look for him.
I helped to some degree in the search, but then I decided that it would be best had I waited at the store for him. Perhaps if he was lost, he could come to the store, or if he was limping from a snake bite or whatever, he would come to the store first. And I felt my place should be there.
Norman! Norman!
I knelt down by him, and I felt him, and felt that he was cold, so I knew had been dead for a while. It's a deep shock and a tragedy to come upon and find your own son. Because you could never imagine or think how this could happen or the loss of a child until you've experienced or gone through it.
Just after 10 p.m., the Pearl River County Sheriff's Department cordoned off the death scene and began an investigation.
Foul play is the first thing that I normally address in the course of an investigation. I ruled it out in this instance because I saw nothing there to indicate that.
Gun was part like that, right?
Yes, sir.
You notice it's been broken and repaired before.
Yeah. At first, I thought it might have been an accident. In viewing the scene, it looked as though he might have been in a tree nearby and subsequently fallen out of the tree and the gun discharged, etc.
After they found him, a deputy came to the store and approached the door. And he looked at me as if trying to find the right words to tell a mother that her son was dead. And I said, "Is he dead?" And he said, "Yes." I can tell you it's the most shattering experience anyone can go through.
We felt that it was an accident. And even when the coroner came back to the store after the results of his examination, he came up with two deputies and he said he felt that it was 90% sure that it was an accidental shooting.
The case of Norman Ladner became a living nightmare for his parents when the coroner issued his findings. He officially ruled their son's death a suicide caused by a close contact wound in which the bullet had entered at Norman's right temple and exited at his left. Imagine for a moment that you are Norman Ladner's parents. You understand the coroner to say that your son's death is an accident. This is at best difficult to accept, but it becomes nearly impossible to accept when you are told it is not an accident after all. Your son has committed suicide.
It was impossible for it to be a suicide. I knew my son too well. He enjoyed and he lived life to the fullest. He was happy, he was outgoing, he was not depressed in any way. And he had too many things going for him.
The results of that autopsy is what I based my findings as to believing that it was a self-inflicted wound. I think that he went back into an area where he felt comfortable, he enjoyed going, and for reasons that I don't know, we don't know, that he decided to take his life. We believe the boy was standing when the shot was fired because of his body position in relation to the gun at the scene.
They made no attempt to locate the bullet. They had never fingerprinted the gun. They cannot say with any facts that his gun was the weapon that was used to kill him.
Even with their ruling of suicide, I still believe that it was an accident. And for several weeks, we did nothing about it. Until we started to piece the jigsaw together, then we realized that it was definitely not a suicide. As a matter of fact, it definitely was not an accident.
One particular item in the coroner's report made no sense to the Ladners. The coroner described a 1 1/4 inch long laceration on the very top of Norman's head. If Norman had committed suicide, how would he sustain such a wound? The coroner and the pathologist found this jagged root at the death scene. They say it was spattered with blood and believe the root caused the laceration.
We didn't see how that could happen because falling straight back, you would hit your head on the side or directly in the back, not up in the crown of your head, up in the peak of his head.
Because the authorities had never found the bullet that killed Norman, the Ladners began their own investigation. They dug through the earth in the area where their son had fallen.
I remember so well the feeling that I had of having to sift through the dried particles of brain tissue and blood of my son.
We found a bullet that was longer than the bullet that Norman's gun would hold. The chamber was not bored out for the length of that bullet. And the bullet was intact. It had a slight twist on it and it had a nick on it. And it had blood stain, dried blood, and a hair that we examined under the magnifying glass.
We have no way of knowing where that bullet came from. We don't have any reason to believe that it was the bullet that was fired that caused the boy's death. Mainly because we feel that the boy was standing at the time the gun was fired. And if that being the case, with the direction of travel that the pathologist says the bullet taken, it would not have been in the ground underneath his head.
Finding the bullet indicated that our son was not in a standing position when he was killed. The bullet was retrieved out of the ground, the bullet was embedded about 2 or 2.5 inches in the ground. And we came to the conclusion that he was lying on the ground and he was shot by someone in a standing position.
A state ballistics expert was unable to determine whether the bullet had been fired by Norman's rifle. He returned the bullet to the Ladners, but they say it is not the one they found. 3 weeks after their son's death, the Ladners went to the coroner's office to question his ruling. According to Mrs. Ladner, a stranger interrupted the conversation.
Can I speak to you over here a minute, please?
And as we were a distance away, he said, "Mrs. Ladner, don't open this case up. You have other children. I suggest you raise them for your own good. You'll never find the person that killed your son." And then the man left. My reaction to that statement was that it was a warning that we would experience some type of problems if we would investigate this case. But my feeling on this issue is that this was my son, and I will not back down under any circumstances.
Undaunted, Norman's father returned to the area where his son had died.
Hey, come here.
300 yards away, he found a strange radio-like device that looked homemade.
What suppose that is?
I don't know. It's from up there.
We figured we had a piece of evidence of some sort that we must try to find somebody that knew what it was.
State authorities felt it was not an important clue, but a neighbor suggested he take it to an ex-narcotics agent living in the area.
The former DEA agent said that this was a type of devices that drug dealers used to signal aircraft by sending out a low-range signal for the proper alignment to drop shipment of drugs. Well, that led me to speculate that Norman possibly came upon someone picking up a shipment of drugs on our land. And possibly this was the reason he was murdered. that he would have recognized the person or persons.
I don't think that that's what happened in this case. It's very hard to accept a death, period. It's that much harder to accept.
What really happened to young Norman Ladner? Authorities continue to stand by the coroner's ruling. Norman's parents refused to believe that their son could have killed himself.
This stays with you almost constantly, almost 24 hours a day. Every waking hour, you think about this. It's a part of us that's missing, and it's a great deal of strain knowing that he was murdered and nothing has been done to bring his murderers to justice.
We have to proceed. We will not stop this investigation, no matter what, until it is finished. We owe it to our son, and we owe it to our children, we owe it to ourselves, and we owe it to the other people's children out there as well. We want to know what happened to our son.
In 1969, 7-year-old Nikki Crowder was hospitalized in Los Angeles, California to have several tumors removed from her throat. There she met 8-year-old Sharita Lynn Harding. Sharita had a rare and dangerous form of cancer.
I like your flowers.
I looked up to Sharita because, one, she was older, and she was there first. So she kind of initiated me of what, being in a new place, new atmosphere.
Let's have a race.
In the days that followed, a warm and caring friendship blossomed between the two girls.
There was a bond there because we mattered to one another. We looked out for what went on, and we had something in common, and that was our illnesses itself.
Hi.
A few weeks after they met, Sharita underwent several hours of grueling surgery.
Mommy, is this going to happen to me?
No, honey, this isn't going to happen to you. She has a different type of operation than you're going to have.
So that's when my mother explained to me that Sharita had had a very, very delicate surgery and that she wouldn't be able to have kids. And I remember feeling like, oh, that, was just the worst thing in the world.
That night, Nikki did her best to comfort her friend.
I'm sorry you're feeling so bad. Does it hurt?
I said, you don't have to cry because if I ever have a baby, I said, you can share it with me and we can both be its mommy. I said, and I'll even name it Sharita after you.
Don't worry.
5 weeks later, Nikki was released from the hospital.
We can share.
The two friends never saw each other again. Today, Nikki is the mother of a beautiful 3-year-old girl. She wants to christen her daughter Sharita and keep the promise she made in 1969.
I promise. I'll name her after you.
A few minutes after Nikki's story aired, we learned that Sharita Lynn Harding was alive and well and living in Oklahoma. We immediately contacted Nikki with the good news. Just 10 days after our broadcast, and more than 21 years after they said goodbye, Sharita Lynn Harding and Nikki Crowder were finally reunited at Nikki's home in Los Angeles.
Oh my God. I can't believe it.
It's been a long time.
20.
I'm so glad to see you. I'm so glad you're alive.
I don't think Nikki has changed that much. She was always caring, giving person. It seems like she's still the same. She would have to be to try to find me in, all these years and be so persistent about it.
Father, in the name of Jesus, watch up over this child, protect her all of the days of her life. Keep her from
On October 20th, 1990, Nikki Crowder was finally able to fulfill her promise.
A child is it's a gift you can't buy. It's the most perfect gift in the world, and it comes from God. And nobody should be deprived of that, whether they have it naturally or can share it with somebody, you know. And that's something that I wanted to share with Sharita. Because of all the joy and strength she gave me, I could give her back something that she missed.
Lord, bless them even as godparents. Cause your spirit to rest upon them.
Being a godmother is special to me because I don't have any kids, and you know, it's giving me like a child of my own that I, you know, can share. I'm just honored, so I'll try to live up to it as best as I can.
I'm very happy that I found Sharita. And now I can go on, and I can go on a positive note because she's alive. And I just like to say thanks to everybody.
I christened thee, Sharita Kennedy Crowder.
November 12, 1988, Chandler, Oklahoma. An anonymous caller reported seeing the body of a man lying beside a phone booth at a highway rest stop. At approximately 8 p.m., the Oklahoma Highway Patrol arrived on the scene. The man had been murdered. Coins were scattered about his body. The dead man was Dwayne McCorkindale, a 27-year-old truck driver and father of twin girls from Kansas City, Kansas. He had been killed by a single shotgun blast, fired at close range into his back. The apparent motive, robbery.
If Dwayne had been killed in an accident, I could have stood it a lot better. It seems so ironic that he was killed for money, when the last thing a trucker will do is carry very much for that very reason.
Boston to Bakersfield, San Antonio to Seattle. Every day, thousands of big rigs travel the highways and back roads of America. Though they come from many walks of life, truckers have one thing in common.
Yeah, it's double whammy. Headed back to Kansas City. Come on back.
CB radios, their lifeline to the rest of the world.
Wife and the 2 baby girls waiting for me back there.
But for Dwayne McCorkindale, an idle conversation over the airwaves may have signed his death warrant. Dwayne's final run began like any other. On November 10th, 1988, he left Detroit, Michigan en route to Oklahoma City.
McCorkindale made a regular run bringing parts to an Oklahoma City automobile plant. We have no reason to believe anything was different that night. He enters the turnpike, he's given a ticket with the time on it, and through that ticket we're able to determine that he made no other stops. He drove directly from the turnpike gate to the rest area.
Other truckers reported that at approximately 5:45 p.m., Dwayne McCorkindale told them he was stopping at the Chandler rest stop to call his wife.
I'm gonna pull over here at this rest area and call the wife. See how things back at home. We'll catch you on the other side. We'll see you later. It's double whammy. We gone. Bye-bye.
We theorized that someone had been listening to him on the CB and actually followed him into that rest area, or perhaps was already there waiting for him. It looked like he was walking up to the telephone, perhaps counting change out in his hand, since there was change there at the base of the phone booth, and was killed as he stepped up to make the call. And whoever was involved in this killed McCorkindale, just shot him in the back, and he was dead before he hit the ground. It killed him instantly. Then checked him to see if he had any money on him, any valuables at all. So people like that are, to us, scary, because those type of people, in our minds, are very likely to do it again. And that's why we place so much emphasis on this case.
What we got, Tom?
Investigators determined that the only items missing were Dwayne's keys and his wallet. They estimate that the killer's take was no more than $25.
Being killed for that little money seems ridiculous. Especially when I know that if they had come up to him in any threatening manner, he would have handed it over.
Early on in the investigation, I hate to say we were at a dead end, but our leads were thin. They were very thin. One of the things that the agent started doing is he started putting notices in the trucker magazines across the United States, and the calls started coming in.
Within days, investigators received reports about a brown Ford Pinto equipped with a CB radio. Several truckers told of a dangerous game of cat and mouse.
At the time of the McCorkindale death, we have reports that the Pinto was driving very erratically on the highway, trying to cut 18-wheelers off.
Hey, man, what do you think you're doing? Trying to get somebody hurt out there?
Well, you don't know who you're messing with, good buddy. We'll drive any way we want.
Hey, man, ain't no way to be. Come on now, behave out here. You're gonna get somebody hurt.
So, we've already killed one trucker, and we'll kill another if you stay in our way.
And when the truck driver would call them on the CB, they were abusive. They said that, leave us alone or we'll do to you what we did to this other trucker.
3 weeks later, authorities received a call from trucker Ed Heitkamp. He was breaking for lunch at a rest stop when he was approached by a young woman who was acting strangely.
Hey there, how you doing?
All right.
Let's see, you got any dope you can let us have?
No,
really
I
need
don't.
something.
She was, well, I hate to say it, but she looked kind of trashy. I mean, it looked like she had been on something, and she was just awful shaky.
Well, me and my friend, we've been down in Texas visiting some friends. We're trying to get back to Alabama. Can you help us find the road to get there?
And she started asking if I could, if I could spare some money. She needed to fix awful bad. I said I wasn't about to give her none for that.
Look, can you...
And about that time, this brown Pinto pulled up, and then she jumped down off the truck and headed for the car, and they took off.
The next day, just 13 miles south on the same highway, Dwayne McCorkindale was gunned down.
After I read that article, I thought maybe I'm lucky that I didn't get out of the truck. Otherwise, I might have been the one that would have got shot, because they was desperate.
While we have no way of knowing if the Pinto was actually involved in this or not, it is without a doubt our strongest lead, and we have got to locate the Pinto and ultimately the people to talk to them to see if nothing else, we can eliminate them from this situation.
Dwayne McCorkindale was murdered doing the thing he loved best. But for him, the freedom of the road ended in one senseless and violent split second.
Having the twins grow up, knowing their father only from pictures, has been hard because I see other little girls and boys with their daddies, and they've asked where their daddy is, and we've had to tell them that their daddy's in heaven with Jesus. Later on, I'm going to have to find a way to tell them what somebody did to them.
When we return, the legend of the Miracle Staircase in Santa Fe, New Mexico. No one knows who built this mysterious and ethereal structure. Santa Fe, New Mexico is a city rich in the tradition and lore of the Old West. A century and a half ago, it was the last outpost along the Santa Fe Trail, a bustling, untamed haven for outlaws, gamblers, mavericks, and renegades. In 1852, the Sisters of Loretto, a religious order in Kentucky, dispatched 7 nuns to bring religion and education to the frontier. It was a journey fraught with danger, harsh weather, hostile Indians, and disease.
When they were on their way, they were attacked by cholera. One of the sisters died, and one had to return because she was too ill to travel. So 5 sisters continued the trip to the west.
This is an A.
Once in Santa Fe, the sisters established a school and began making plans to build a chapel. Finally, in April of 1878, the sisters celebrated the completion of the Chapel of Our Lady of Light. It still stands today. More than 20 French and Italian stonemasons spent 5 years constructing the magnificent Gothic chapel.
Our chapel is so splendid, but how shall we get to
The sisters were delighted except for one minor detail. There was no staircase leading to the choir loft. The sisters finally had their chapel, but no means of ascending to the music chamber.
Many of the lofts of churches, early churches in New Mexico, had no staircases. They simply leaned a ladder up and climbed the ladder and sang. But the sisters couldn't climb a ladder in their long robes, so they needed a staircase.
A conventional stairway was not feasible, as it would require the removal of too many seats.
Some carpenters had come in and looked the situation over, but shook their heads in dismay and said there was just no way. And so they decided that they would not do anything until they made a novena to St. Joseph, the patron of carpenters.
Hallowed be thy name. Thy
A
kingdom
novena
come,
requires 9 days of meditation and regular prayer.
as it is in heaven. Give us this
For 8
day
days, the sisters
our daily
prayed.
bread,
Nothing happened.
And forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us.
On the 9th and final day of the novena, a stranger arrived at the chapel.
Come in, sir.
Mother Superior, I'm seeking work.
And what is your trade, sir?
I'm a carpenter.
We do have need of a stairway to be built in our chapel, but it's a
The
great
sisters let the stranger attempt what so many had said was impossible. They were hopeful. Their prayers had been answered. If the carpenter had a name, it has long since been forgotten. According to the legend, he carried only 3 tools: a hammer, a saw, and a T-square. Some say he worked for 6 months, others say it was more. When he was finished, he called the nuns together. "You have your staircase," he announced. Then he left, without being paid, and was never heard from again.
The carpenter obviously had to be a very fine carpenter. He had to be a master carpenter to build the staircase that was built. Because you see, there's no center support. This is what makes that staircase so extraordinary. There is no center post. It rests by its own geometric balance and design. It's very steep, 22 feet, going around and around, because it makes 2 360-degree turns. And once again, with no center post, there's a certain springiness when you walk up it, and you realize you're climbing a very, very special staircase.
Sisters, I've counted the stairs. There's 33. The exact number of years our Lord Jesus Christ was on this earth.
I never fail to count those steps whenever I go up or come down, and it's still 33.
The sisters planned a feast for the carpenter. When he failed to appear, they searched the town. The mysterious stranger was missing.
You seen him around town?
Nobody had seen him.
Thank you very much.
Nobody knew where he slept. Nobody ever fed him. They made a novena to St. Joseph, the patron of carpenters. So it's understandable that they would believe St. Joseph did it.
So far as anyone knows, the carpenter never returned to Santa Fe. The chapel is now a tourist attraction. Through the years, the mystery surrounding the staircase persisted. Then in 1965, Oscar Hadwiger, a third-generation master carpenter, visited the chapel.
He went in and he saw the staircase, and of course he was overwhelmed Being a builder, any builder is overwhelmed when they see this magnificent piece of carpentry. And he remembered a story in the family that his grandfather had come to this country and had built a staircase.
Oscar's grandfather, Johann Hadwiger, was a renowned European carpenter who spent 2 years traveling and working in Colorado and New